on my son's wedding day. I thought the worst thing that could happen was being forgotten in the crowd. But when my daughter-in-law raised her glass, smiled sweetly, and announced an auction to get rid of her sick mother-in-law, and my son laughed while bidding just $8, I knew this would be a moment I'd never forget. What I didn't expect was that the person who'd bid $3 million would be a shadow from my past I thought was lost forever, and the one who'd helped me reclaim everything that had been taken from me. My name is Margaret Harlow, and at 68 years old, I never imagined I'd be standing in front of my bedroom mirror, adjusting a navy blue dress for the 100th time, wondering if it was elegant enough for my only son's wedding. The price tag had made me wince. $200 was more than I usually spent on clothes in 6 months, but this was Ethan's big day. I wanted to look presentable, maybe even beautiful, though I knew that ship had sailed long ago. I smoothed down the fabric over my hips, noting how it cleverly disguised the weight I'd gained since Robert's death 3 years ago. My late husband would have laughed at my fussing. "Maggie," he'd have said in that gentle voice of his, "you'd look stunning in a potato sack." But Robert wasn't here anymore, and I had to face this day alone. The morning light streaming through my modest apartment window caught the silver in my hair. I'd spent 40 years as a nurse, the last 15 as head nurse at St. Andrew's Memorial Hospital before retiring. These hands had saved lives, comforted the dying, and held my son when he came into this world screaming and perfect. Now they trembled slightly as I fastened my mother's pearl necklace around my neck, the only valuable thing I owned besides my wedding ring. Ethan was everything to me. After Robert's sudden heart attack, my son had been my anchor, calling every Sunday, taking me to dinner once a month. But that was before Sophie entered the picture. I tried to shake off the familiar knot in my stomach that appeared whenever I thought of my soon-to-be daughter-in-law. It wasn't jealousy, exactly. I understood that young people needed their space, that Ethan deserved to build his own life. But Sophie, there was something calculating in her perfectly made-up eyes, something cold in her practiced smile. The first time Ethan brought her home, she'd looked around my apartment with barely concealed disdain. "How cozy," she'd said, her voice dripping with condescension. "Ethan told me you used to live in a bigger place. It must be hard, downsizing like this." What she didn't know, what Ethan had apparently failed to mention, was that I'd sold our family home to help pay for his business school tuition. The cozy apartment was my choice, my sacrifice, and I wore it like a badge of honor. Their engagement had been swift. Just 8 months after they'd met, Sophie had planned an elaborate wedding that I suspected cost more than my annual pension. I'd offered to contribute what I could, but Sophie had waved me off with a laugh that tinkled like breaking glass. "Oh, Margaret, that's sweet, but Daddy's handling everything. We wouldn't want you to strain your budget." I glanced at the invitation on my dresser, embossed in gold on cream cardstock, the Harlow Mitchell wedding. It proclaimed as if my family name was an afterthought. The venue was the prestigious Seaside Grand Hotel in Portland, a place where senators' daughters got married, not the sons of nurses and hardware store managers. My reflection stared back at me, a woman who'd once been considered pretty. Now just another invisible older woman society had decided to forget. But today wasn't about me. Today, I would smile, I would be gracious, and I would watch my only child marry a woman who barely tolerated my existence. Because that's what mothers do. I picked up my clutch purse, checking one last time that I had everything. Tissues, lipstick, antacids for the nervous stomach that had been plaguing me all week. The small gift I'd prepared for Ethan sat on my nightstand, a watch that had belonged to his father, carefully polished and serviced. Sophie probably had some designer timepiece ready to upstage it, but this watch had history, love, memory. As I headed for the door, I caught sight of the photo on my hallway table, Robert, Ethan, and me at Ethan's college graduation. We looked so happy, so complete, "Give me strength, Robert," I whispered. "Help me get through this day with dignity." The taxi waited outside, meter running. As Portland's skyline came into view, I took a deep breath. In a few hours, I would no longer be the most important woman in my son's life. The thought shouldn't have hurt as much as it did. But there it was, sharp and undeniable, like a needle finding its way straight to my heart. The Seaside Grand Hotel loomed before me like a marble fortress, its columns reaching toward the gray Portland sky. Valets in crisp uniforms rushed to open doors for guests arriving in Mercedes and BMWs while my taxi looked decidedly out of place in the circular drive. I paid the driver and stood for a moment, clutching my purse, watching the parade of Sophie's family and friends sweep past in their designer dresses and custom suits. Inside, the lobby took my breath away. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbows across marble floors, and enormous floral arrangements perfumed the air with roses and peonies. A string quartet played softly near the grand staircase. I felt like I'd wandered onto a movie set, an extra who'd gotten lost on her way to craft services. Name? A young woman with a clipboard and a practiced smile blocked my path to the ballroom. "Margaret Harlow. I'm the groom's mother." Her eyes flicked down the list, and something shifted in her expression. Was it pity? "Oh, yes. Mrs. Harlow, you're at table 14, right through those doors, then toward the back." Table 14. The number hit me like cold water. I forced a smile and made my way into the reception hall, where 200 chairs dressed in white silk awaited the ceremony. My eyes found the family section immediately, the first 3 rows on both sides, decorated with extra ribbons and flowers. Sophie's family filled the bride's side completely. On the groom's side, I saw Ethan's college friends, his business partners, but the seat that should have been mine, front row, on the aisle, held a reserved sign for someone else. I found my table assignment for the reception afterward and nearly laughed at the cruel irony. Table 14 sat in the far corner, partially hidden behind a decorative screen, as far from the head table as geometrically possible. The other place cards bore names I didn't recognize. Great-Aunt Mildred, Cousin Theodore twice removed, the kinds of relatives you invited out of obligation but hoped would decline. "Looking for your seat?" A deep voice startled me. I turned to find a man in his early 70s, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that whispered money rather than shouted it. His hair was silver, his bearing dignified, but it was his eyes that caught me, sharp, intelligent, and oddly familiar. "Table 14, apparently," I said, trying to keep the bitterness from my voice. "Ah, a fellow exile. I'm at 14 as well." He extended his hand. "Doctor, Elias Morgan. I'm here for the bride's side, though I confess I barely know the family. Some distant connection through her mother's cousins. I believe, and you are, Margaret Harlow, mother of the groom." The words felt hollow. His eyebrows rose slightly. The mother of the groom at table 14? How unusual. Before I could respond, the wedding coordinator's voice rang out, directing guests to take their seats for the ceremony. I found myself in the back row, craning my neck to see past elaborate hats and tall groomsmen. When the music began and Ethan took his place at the altar, my heart swelled despite everything. My boy looked so handsome, so grown up in his tuxedo. Then Sophie appeared, gliding down the aisle in a dress that probably cost more than my car, and the look of adoration on Ethan's face made my chest tighten. He'd looked at me that way once, when he was small and I was his whole world. Now his eyes held room only for her. The ceremony passed in a blur of vows I could barely hear from my distant seat. I watched my son slip a ring onto Sophie's finger, saw him kiss his bride as the crowd erupted in applause. The photographer captured every angle of the happy couple. The wedding party, the bride with her family, the groom with his groomsmen. No one called for the mother of the groom. As guests filed toward the reception hall, I lingered, hoping Ethan might look for me. Instead, I watched him laugh with Sophie's parents, his arm around his new father-in-law's shoulders like they were old friends. Sophie's mother air-kissed everyone in sight, diamonds glittering at her throat, while I stood alone in my department store dress and my mother's pearls. "Doctor." Morgan appeared at my elbow as I finally made my way to table 14. "May I?" he asked, pulling out my chair with old-fashioned courtesy. "I noticed you during the ceremony. You seemed to be straining to see. They should have seated you closer to the front." "Yes. Well," I managed, unfolding my napkin with unnecessary precision. "I suppose they had their reasons." The head table sprawled across the front of the room on a raised platform. Ethan, Sophie, their wedding party, and both sets of Sophie's grandparents. My absence from that table felt like a physical wound. Around us, at table 14, the other forgotten relatives made polite conversation, but I could barely focus on their words. My eyes kept drifting to my son, hoping he'd look my way, acknowledge my presence with even a wave. He never did. The dinner progressed with military precision. 5 courses of food I couldn't taste, my stomach churning with each burst of laughter from the head table. Sophie's father gave a toast that lasted 15 minutes, detailing his daughter's achievements from kindergarten through her MBA. Ethan's best man told stories about their college days that carefully edited out any mention of family. "Through it all, Doctor." Morgan sat beside me, a surprisingly comforting presence, making occasional observations that suggested he understood more about my situation than I'd revealed. Then Sophie stood, champagne flute in hand, her wedding dress catching the light like fresh snow. The room fell silent. "Thank you all for being here on the happiest day of my life," she began, her voice carrying perfectly through the sound system. "Ethan and I are so grateful for your love and support as we begin our journey together." Polite applause rippled through the crowd. I relaxed slightly, thinking this would be another generic thank you speech. "Now," Sophie continued, her smile widening in a way that made my skin prickle, "I want to do something special. A little unconventional, but then again, I've never been one for tradition, She giggled, and her bridesmaids tittered in response. "As many of you know, when you marry someone, you marry their family too, and sometimes that family comes with certain challenges." My blood turned to ice. Beside me, "Doctor." Morgan set down his water glass very carefully. "So I thought we'd have a little fun," Sophie went on, her eyes scanning the room before landing on table 14. "On me. An auction, if you will. Who wants to take on the care and feeding of one slightly used mother-in-law?" A confused murmur ran through the crowd. Someone laughed nervously. "I'm serious." Sophie's voice took on a sharp edge beneath the sweetness. She's house-trained, mostly, comes with her own set of outdated opinions and a charming tendency to drop by unannounced. Medical bills not included. And trust me, at her age, those really start to add up. The murmur grew louder. Some people were laughing now, thinking it must be some kind of joke. Others looked uncomfortable. At the head table, I saw Ethan's best man lean over to whisper something, but my son was grinning. "So, let's start the bidding." Sophie raised her glass higher. "Who'll give me $20 for one Margaret Harlow? Do I hear 20? $20 for a mother-in-law who still thinks her baby boy can do no wrong." "Oi, $8!" Ethan called out, laughing. "That's all I've got left after this wedding." The room exploded in laughter. Real laughter now. Cruel and cutting. I sat frozen, my hands gripping the edge of the table so hard my knuckles went white. This couldn't be happening. This was a nightmare. And any moment I would wake up in my small apartment, getting ready for my son's wedding where I would be treated with basic human dignity. $8 from the groom, Sophie crowed. Come on, people. Surely she's worth more than a sandwich at Subway. She was a nurse. She can probably still take a pulse. That's got to be worth something. More laughter. Someone called out $10, and the auction continued. My life reduced to a punchline at my own son's wedding. I wanted to run, to disappear, to sink through the floor and never be seen again. But I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. couldn't do anything but sit there while 200 people laughed at my humiliation. Then, cutting through the noise like a blade, came a voice I'd been listening to all evening. $3 million. Doctor. Morgan was on his feet, his posture military straight, his voice carrying an authority that silenced the room instantly. He wasn't smiling. Sophie's face went through several expressions in rapid succession: amusement, confusion, then something like fear. I'm sorry, what? $3 million, he repeated, each word precise and cold. For Mrs. Harlow, though I should note that putting a price on a human being went out of fashion with the Emancipation Proclamation. I thought your Stanford education might have covered that. Mrs. Mitchell. Or is it Mrs.? Harlow now? Hard to tell, given how little respect you seem to have for the name. The silence was deafening. Sophie's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. At the head table, Ethan's grin had finally disappeared. It was just a joke, Sophie stammered. Was it, Doctor? Morgan's voice could have frosted glass. How strange. I always thought jokes were supposed to be funny. He turned to me then, offering his hand with the same courtesy he'd shown all evening. Mrs. Harlow, would you care to get some air? I find the atmosphere in here has become rather toxic. I looked at his outstretched hand, then up at his face. There was something in his eyes. Recognition? No, that was impossible. But there was kindness there, and strength, and a fury on my behalf that no one had shown in years. I took his hand and stood on shaking legs, letting him guide me toward the exit while 200 wedding guests watched in stunned silence. The cool Portland air hit my face like a blessing as we stepped onto the hotel's terrace. My legs felt weak. And Doctor. Morgan guided me to a bench overlooking the harbor. The setting sun painted the water gold and crimson, too beautiful for such an ugly day. Thank you, I managed, my voice barely a whisper. You didn't have to. Yes, I did. He sat beside me, maintaining a respectful distance. No one should be treated that way, especially not by family. I laughed bitterly. Family? That's what I thought we were. We sat in silence for a moment before he spoke again. You don't recognize me, do you? Maggie. My head snapped up at the nickname. Only one person had ever called me that besides Robert. My heart began to race as I studied his face more carefully, the strong jaw now softened with age, the dark hair turned silver. But those eyes. Elias? The name came out as a breathless question. Elias Brennan. A small smile tugged at his lips. Morgan now. I took my stepfather's name when he adopted me after my father died. But yes, it's me. The world tilted on its axis. Elias Brennan, the young medical student who'd swept me off my feet 45 years ago when I was a nursing student at Boston General. The man I'd loved with every fiber of my being before my parents convinced me he was too ambitious, too different from us, too everything. The man I'd walked away from to marry safe. Steady Robert Harlow. How? What are you doing here? My mind couldn't process this collision of past and present. Sophie's mother is my second cousin, he said. I received an invitation, and something made me accept. Call it intuition, or maybe fate, if you believe in such things. He turned to face me fully. I heard about Robert's passing. I'm sorry. He was a good man. Yes, he was. I twisted my wedding ring, a habit when nervous. How did you know? I've kept tabs on you over the years. Not in a stalking way, he added quickly. I never quite got over wondering about the road not taken. I knew you became a nurse, married Robert, had a son. I knew you were happy, and that was enough. Were you happy? The question slipped out before I could stop it. I built a good life, as he said carefully. Medical degree, then an MBA. Started a medical technology company that did well. Very well. Actually, married once. Briefly, but it didn't take. No children. Spent my years building an empire instead of a family. He looked out at the water. Success is a cold bedfellow. Maggie. The terrace door burst open, and Ethan appeared, his face flushed. Mom, there you are. What the hell was that about? I stood slowly, drawing myself up to my full height. For the first time all day, I didn't feel small. What about, Ethan? The part where your bride auctioned me off like cattle, or the part where you bid $8? It was a joke. Sophie has a quirky sense of humor. You're being too sensitive. Sensitive? The word came out sharp enough to cut. Your wife humiliated me in front of 200 people, and you laughed. Because it was funny. God, Mom, why do you have to make everything so dramatic? He ran his hand through his hair, messing up the careful styling. And who is this guy? Anyway, your sugar daddy? Elias stood, and suddenly the successful businessman was very much in evidence. Dr. Elias Morgan, I'm the CEO of MedTech Innovations. You might recognize the name. We hold the patents on about 60% of the diagnostic equipment your wife's father's hospital uses. We also just acquired majority stakes in 3 major healthcare firms on the East Coast, including, I believe, the one where you work as a junior analyst. The color drained from Ethan's face. You're that Elias Morgan? The very same. And I'm appalled by what I witnessed in there. Your mother deserved a place of honor at your wedding, not exile to the reject table. She deserved respect, not ridicule. You don't understand. Ethan protested, but his voice had lost its edge. Sophie comes from a different world. They joke differently. They're snobs, I interrupted, finding my voice at last. And you've become one too. When did you become this person, Ethan? When did my kind, caring son turn into someone who could laugh while his mother was being humiliated? I haven't changed. You're the one who's being difficult. Sophie says... Sophie says? I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Let me guess. Sophie says I'm too clingy. Sophie says I dress badly. Sophie says I'm an embarrassment. What else does Sophie say, Ethan? He had the grace to look uncomfortable. She just thinks, we need boundaries, that you're too involved in our lives. Too involved? My voice rose. I see you once a month if I'm lucky. I call once a week and half the time you don't answer. I offered to help with the wedding and was told my money wasn't good enough. So tell me, Ethan, exactly how am I too involved? Mom, please. No. I held up my hand. I'm done. I'm done pretending this is normal. I'm done accepting crumbs of affection from my only child. I'm done being treated like an obligation instead of your mother. Elias stepped closer to me, not touching but offering silent support. His presence gave me strength I didn't know I needed. If you walk out now, you'll ruin my wedding, Ethan said, trying for authority but achieving only petulance. Your wedding was ruined the moment your bride decided to auction off your mother, Elias said coolly. Margaret is simply declining to participate further in her own degradation. We returned to the reception hall like warriors entering a battlefield. The moment we stepped through the doors, conversation ceased mid-sentence. 200 pairs of eyes tracked our movement as Elias escorted me back toward table 14, his hand protective at my elbow. Sophie materialized in our path, her wedding dress rustling with each agitated step. There you are. We need to talk about your little scene. There was no scene until you created one, I said, surprised by the steadiness of my own voice. Now, if you'll excuse us, Doctor, Morgan and I were returning to our seats. Our seats? Sophie's laugh tinkled falsely. Oh, I don't think so. You've disrupted my wedding enough. I think it's time you left. Actually, Elias interjected smoothly, I believe I won the auction. $3 million, wasn't it? That makes Margaret my guest for the remainder of the evening. Sophie's face flushed an unbecoming red. That wasn't real. It was entertainment. Entertainment? Elias's voice could have frozen champagne. How fascinating that you find human degradation entertaining. Tell me, did they teach that at Stanford, or is it a family tradition? How dare you? No. I stepped forward, finally finding my voice. How dare you? How dare you stand there in that white dress pretending to be innocent when you just tried to auction me off like property? How dare you turn my son against me? How dare you make me feel unwelcome at my own child's wedding? The entire room was watching now. Good. Let them see. Let them all see what kind of woman Ethan had married. You're making a fool of yourself. Sophie hissed. This is exactly why we didn't want you more involved. You're an embarrassment. An embarrassment? I laughed, and several people near us stepped back. I raised my son alone after his father died. I worked double shifts to pay for his education. I sold my house to cover his business school tuition. I gave him everything. And this is what I get in return? Being auctioned off at his wedding like unwanted furniture? Mom, please. Ethan appeared at Sophie's side, his face a mixture of embarrassment and anger. You're causing a scene. No. Ethan, your wife caused a scene when she put me up for auction. I'm just refusing to be sold. I looked him straight in the eye. This child I'd carried for 9 months, nursed through fevers, cheered at every game and graduation. Do you know what the worst part is? It's not what she did. It's that you laughed. You looked at me, your mother, being humiliated, and you laughed. It was funny. He threw his hands up. Why can't you just take a joke? Because cruelty isn't funny. My voice rang through the ballroom. Because watching someone you claim to love being hurt should never make you laugh. Because the boy I raised would have stood up and defended me, not bid $8 like I was worth less than a pizza. Don't you dare blame this on Ethan, Sophie snarled, dropping all pretense of sweetness. You've been a burden since day one, always calling, always needing something, always reminding him of where he came from instead of letting him focus on where he's going. Where he came from? I felt Elias's hand on my arm, steadying me, but I shook it off. This was my fight. You mean from a loving home? From parents who sacrificed everything for his future? From a mother who would have died for him without hesitation? From poverty, Sophie spat. From mediocrity, from a small life in a small apartment with small ambitions. Ethan is meant for bigger things than visiting his mother in her sad little place, pretending he hasn't outgrown that life. The silence that followed was deafening. I looked at Ethan, waiting for him to defend me, to disagree, to show some spark of the son I'd raised. Instead, he looked away. That small gesture broke something inside me that I hadn't even realized was still whole. I see, I said quietly. Well then, I suppose I should stop burdening you with my presence. Mom, Ethan started, but I held up my hand. No, you've made your choice clear. You chose her. You chose this. I gestured around the opulent ballroom. You chose to laugh while your mother was humiliated. That tells me everything I need to know about the man you've become. I turned to Elias. Would you mind driving me home? I find I've lost my appetite for wedding cake. It would be my pleasure, he said, offering his arm. As we walked toward the exit, I heard Sophie's voice rise behind us. That's right, run away. And don't think you'll be welcome at Christmas either or when we have children. You made your choice. I stopped at the doorway and turned back one last time. The entire wedding party was on their feet now. Sophie red-faced and shrieking, Ethan trying to calm her, guests whispering behind their hands or openly recording on their phones. No, Sophie, I said, my voice carrying clearly across the room. You made my choice. You turned my son into someone I don't recognize, someone who could laugh at his mother's pain. Keep him. You two deserve each other. Then I walked out of that ballroom with my head held high, leaving behind the wreckage of what had once been my family, while $3 million worth of backup walked beside me into the Portland night. The hotel manager intercepted us in the lobby, wringing his hands. Doctor, Morgan, Mrs. Harlow, please. The wedding party would like a word in private. Perhaps we could use my office. I started to refuse, but Elias touched my arm gently. It might be worth hearing what they have to say. Closure, if nothing else. 5 minutes later, we sat in leather chairs facing Ethan and Sophie across the manager's mahogany desk. Sophie had attempted to repair her makeup, but mascara still smudged beneath her eyes. Ethan looked like a boy caught stealing candy, sullen and defensive. This is ridiculous, Sophie started immediately. One joke and you storm out like... Sophie, shut up, Ethan said sharply. She gaped at him, but he continued. Mom, I'm sorry. The auction thing went too far. We should have... Should have what? I interrupted. Humiliated me more privately? Made fun of me behind my back like you usually do? We don't make fun of you! Really? Then why did 200 people laugh so readily? They've heard it before, haven't they? The jokes about your embarrassing mother, your clingy mother, your poor mother who doesn't fit into Sophie's world. Ethan's guilty expression told me everything. It wasn't like that, he said weakly. Sophie she comes from a different background. Her family, they joke around differently. Stop hiding behind that excuse, Elias interjected coldly. I've done business with Sophie's father. He's a social climber who married into old money and spends his life trying to prove he belongs. The cruelty isn't breeding, it's insecurity. Sophie's face went purple. How dare! I dare because it's true, Elias continued calmly. I've been in those circles my entire career. Real class doesn't need to step on others to elevate itself. What you did tonight wasn't sophisticated humor, it was trashy behavior dressed in designer clothing. Who the hell are you anyway? Sophie snarled. Her boyfriend, sugar daddy? What kind of old man picks up women at... I'm someone who knew Margaret before you were born, Elias cut her off. Someone who remembers when she was the brightest light in any room. Someone who watched her give up her dreams so her son could chase his. He looked at Ethan. Did she ever tell you she was accepted to the nurse practitioner program at Johns Hopkins? Full scholarship. She turned it down when she got pregnant with you. Ethan's face went slack. What, Mom, you never... There were a lot of things I never told you, I said quietly. I didn't want you to feel guilty about the life I chose. Being your mother was enough. At least, I thought it was. Mom, I didn't know... Of course you didn't. You never asked. When was the last time you asked me about my life, my dreams, my feelings? When did I stop being a person to you and become just an obligation? That's not fair. Isn't it? I leaned forward. Tell me, what's my favorite book? What music do I listen to? Who are my friends? What do I do on Sundays when you don't call? His silence was answer enough. This is exactly what I mean, Sophie interjected. This guilt-tripping, this manipulation. Oh, shut up, I snapped, surprising everyone, including myself. Just shut up, Sophie, you won. You got what you wanted. You turned my son against me, made him ashamed of where he came from. Congratulations. Enjoy your victory. Mom, she didn't turn me against you, Ethan protested. No? Then explain table 14? Explain why I wasn't in the family photos? Explain why you laughed when she auctioned me off. It was the moment. Everyone was laughing. You just showed me who you really are, I finished. And I don't like what I see. Ethan flinched as if I'd slapped him. That's not fair. I'm still your son. Are you? Because my son would never have treated anyone that way, let alone his mother. My son had compassion, integrity, a kind heart. I stood up. I don't know who you are anymore. So that's it? His voice cracked slightly. You're just giving up on me? No. Ethan, you gave up on me first. I'm just finally accepting it. Sophie grabbed Ethan's arm. Let her go. If she wants to be dramatic and storm out, that's her choice. We don't need... Actually, Elias stood as well, his voice cutting through her tirade. There's something else you should know. That company you work for. Ethan? MedTech Innovations holds 42% of their stock. I've already called an emergency board meeting for Monday morning. The agenda includes a thorough review of all junior staff positions. The blood drained from Ethan's face. You're threatening my job because of a wedding joke? I'm considering whether I want someone who publicly humiliates his own mother representing my interests, Elias corrected. Character matters in business. Mr. Harlow, a man who'll betray his family for a laugh will betray anyone. This is blackmail, Sophie shrieked. This is consequences, Elias replied calmly, something you're apparently unaccustomed to. I put my hand on Elias's arm. Don't use your power to hurt him. That would make us no better than them. He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "You're right, of course. Your job is safe, Ethan, but know that it's safe because your mother, the woman you just humiliated, has more grace and dignity than you deserve." I moved toward the door, then paused. "I want you to know something. Both of you. I would have loved you, Sophie, if you'd let me. I would have welcomed you as the daughter I never had. All you had to do was show me basic human kindness. That's all. Just kindness." "Mom, wait." But I was done waiting, done hoping, done pretending that love could survive such cruelty. As Elias and I left the office, I heard Ethan call after me one more time. I didn't turn around. Sometimes the only way to save yourself is to stop trying to save someone who's determined to drown, even if that someone is your own son, standing in the hotel lobby. I suddenly felt the weight of what had just happened crash over me. My legs trembled, and Elias quickly guided me to a nearby settee. "Breathe, Maggie," he said gently. "Just breathe." "I just lost my son," I whispered, the words tasting like ashes in my mouth. "My only child." "No," Elias said firmly. "You just refuse to lose yourself. There's a difference." Before I could respond, a commotion erupted from the ballroom. Through the open doors, we could see wedding guests spilling out, voices raised in excitement. Phones were everywhere, recording, photographing. I heard fragments of conversation. "Did you see the mother's face? $3 million. Most dramatic wedding ever." "We need to leave," Elias said, helping me to my feet. "This is about to become a circus." But it was too late. A young woman with perfectly styled hair and a press badge rushed toward us. "Mrs. Harlow, Tessa Banks from Portland Society News. Can you comment on what just happened? Is it true someone bid $3 million for you?" "No comment," Elias said firmly, shielding me with his body as we moved toward the exit. More reporters appeared as if from nowhere. The society wedding of the season had just become a scandal, and they smelled blood in the water. "Doctor, Morgan, is it true you're worth billions? Are you and Mrs. Harlow romantically involved? Was this staged? A publicity stunt? Mrs. Harlow, how does it feel to be auctioned off by your daughter-in-law?" That last question stopped me cold. I turned to face the growing crowd of media and gawkers, and Elias tensed beside me. "How does it feel?" I repeated, my voice surprisingly steady. "It feels like watching everything you've lived for crumble in front of 200 witnesses. It feels like discovering the child you raised has become a stranger. It feels like being shown exactly how little you matter to the person who once meant everything to you." The reporters pressed closer, sensing the raw emotion in my words. "But you know what else it feels like?" I continued, straightening my spine. "It feels like freedom. Freedom from pretending that cruelty is humor. Freedom from accepting disrespect to keep the peace. Freedom from shrinking myself to fit into spaces where I'm not wanted." "So you're cutting your son off?" someone shouted. "My son cut me off first," I replied. "I'm just finally accepting it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I've had enough of being tonight's entertainment." Elias and I pushed through the crowd toward the exit, behind us. I could hear Sophie's shrill voice rising above the chaos, trying to spin the narrative, but the damage was done. By tomorrow, the story would be everywhere. The society bride who auctioned off her mother-in-law and got a $3 million bid from a billionaire. Outside, Elias's driver was already waiting with the car. As we slid into the back seat, I caught a glimpse of Ethan in the hotel entrance, still in his wedding tuxedo, looking lost and younger than his 28 years. For a moment, our eyes met through the car window. I saw him mouth the word "Mom" and start forward, but Sophie appeared and grabbed his arm, yanking him back inside. "The towers are somewhere else?" Elias asked gently as the car pulled away. I gave him my address, then laughed bitterly. "You might want to drop me off at the corner. My building isn't exactly the Ritz." "Maggie, I've seen where you live isn't what matters. It's how you live. And you've lived with more dignity and grace than anyone in that ballroom tonight." We rode in silence for a while, the Portland streets blurring past. Finally, I asked, why were you really at the wedding? It wasn't just a family obligation, was it? Elias was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, I've kept track of you over the years. Like I said, when I saw your name on the invitation as mother of the groom, I wanted to see you, to know if you were happy, to know if I'd made the right choice, stepping aside all those years ago. And I got my answer tonight. You deserved so much better, Maggie. Better than me running off to chase my ambitions. Better than Robert dying and leaving you alone. And certainly better than what happened in that ballroom. Robert was a good husband, I said softly. He loved me in his quiet way. We built a good life together. I know, I'm glad. But what now? What will you do? I stared out at the city lights, considering, I don't know. For 28 years, my life revolved around being Ethan's mother. Without that, who am I? You're Margaret Harlow, Elias said firmly, former head nurse, woman of strength and character, and regardless of what happened tonight, you're still a mother who loved her son enough to let him go rather than enable his cruelty. The car stopped outside my building. I could see Mrs. Patterson from 3B peering through her curtains, probably wondering about the expensive car. Tomorrow the whole building would be talking. Thank you, I said to Elias, for everything, for standing up for me, for getting me out of there, for seeing me. No one's really seen me in a very long time. I've always seen you, Maggie, he said softly, even when you couldn't see yourself. I reached for the door handle, then paused. The $3 million. That wasn't real, was it? You're not actually going to... Oh, it's real, he interrupted. I've already instructed my lawyer to set up a trust in your name. Consider it 45 years of compounded interest on the life we didn't have. Elias, I can't... You can and you will, he said firmly, not because you need it, but because you deserve it, because every woman who's ever been diminished by people who should cherish her deserves to have someone stand up and say no. She's worth more than you could ever afford. I felt tears prick my eyes for the first time all evening. I don't know what to say. Say you'll have dinner with me tomorrow, he replied. We have 45 years to catch up on, and I'd like to hear every story. Looking at him, this man who'd known me when I was young and full of dreams, who'd seen me humiliated and had stood up like a knight in expensive armor, I made a decision. Yes, I said simply. Yes to dinner. Yes to catching up. Yes to whatever comes next. As I walked into my building, I didn't look back at the expensive car or the man inside it. I didn't think about the son I'd lost or the wedding that had become a war zone. I thought only about tomorrow, and for the first time in years, tomorrow felt like a beginning instead of just another day to endure. My apartment felt different as I closed the door behind me, smaller somehow, as if the evening's events had shifted my perspective on everything. I kicked off my heels and padded to the kitchen, pouring myself a glass of water with hands that barely trembled. The dress I'd agonized over hung limp now, wrinkled from the evening's drama. My phone buzzed, 17 missed calls from Ethan, 3 from numbers I didn't recognize, probably reporters. I turned it off and set it aside. Tomorrow would bring its own battles. I changed into my comfortable robe and sat by the window, looking out at the Portland skyline. Somewhere in this city, my son was dancing at his reception, pretending everything was fine, somewhere. Elias was probably in his hotel suite, making plans I couldn't quite imagine yet. And here I sat, 68 years old, suddenly untethered from the life I'd known. The next morning came too soon. I woke to sunlight streaming through my curtains and the sound of persistent knocking. Through the peephole, I saw Mrs. Patterson holding the morning paper. Margaret, dear, you need to see this, she said breathlessly when I opened the door. The headline screamed, Mother-in-law auction rocks society wedding. Billionaire bids $3 million. Below was a photo someone had snapped of Elias and me leaving the hotel, his protective stance unmistakable. Is it true, Mrs.? Patterson asked, eyes wide with curiosity and concern. Every word, I said simply. The day blurred past in a strange mixture of phone calls I didn't answer and neighbors I gently turned away. Around 4 in the afternoon, a knock came. Different from the others, somehow more certain. Elias stood in my hallway wearing jeans and a casual shirt, looking nothing like the corporate titan from last night. "I thought we might skip the fancy restaurant," he said, holding up a bag from my favorite deli, "if you'll let me in." We ate pastrami sandwiches at my small kitchen table, talking about everything except the previous evening. He told me about building his company, the loneliness of success, the regrets that money couldn't cure. I told him about nursing, about raising Ethan, about the quiet years with Robert. "Do you hate me for walking away?" I asked finally. "Do you hate me for letting you?" he countered. "We were different people then," I said, young and scared and trying to please everyone but ourselves. "And now? Now I'm old and tired of pleasing anyone." He laughed, the sound filling my small kitchen. 68 isn't old, Maggie. It's experienced. It's knowing who you are and what you won't tolerate. A sharp knock interrupted us. Through the peephole, I saw Ethan, still in yesterday's wrinkled tuxedo shirt, Sophie nowhere in sight. "I know you're in there. Mom," he called. "Please, just give me 5 minutes." I looked at Elias, who shrugged. "Your choice. I'll support whatever you decide." I opened the door but didn't invite him in. "What do you want, Ethan?" He looked terrible. Red eyes, stubbled face, the look of someone who'd been up all night. "Sophie's gone to her parents' place. The wedding's all over social media. My phone won't stop ringing. Mom, If you're here because your life is inconvenient now, you can leave," I said flatly. "No, I'm here because I finally saw it, really saw it, when I watched the video someone posted, saw your face when I bid $8. His voice cracked. I saw myself turning into someone I don't recognize, someone Dad would be ashamed of. "Your father's not here to be ashamed," I said, "but I am, and that should have been enough." "I know. God, I know, Sophie, she makes me feel important. Like I'm more than just some kid from Portland who got lucky. But last night, when you walked out, all I could think about was every sacrifice you made, every double shift, every time you went without so I could have more. Pretty words, Ethan, but they're just words. What can I do?" And he was crying now. This son who'd laughed at my humiliation. "How do I fix this?" "You don't," I said simply. "You can't undo cruelty with apologies. You can't erase public humiliation with private regret. You made your choice. You chose her world over my love. Now live with it." "So that's it? You're done with me? Your only son?" I thought for a long moment. I'll always love the boy you were. I'll always mourn the man you could have been. But the person you are now? The person who could laugh while his mother was auctioned off. I don't know him, and I don't want to. "Mom, please." "Goodbye, Ethan." I closed the door on his protests, on his tears, on 28 years of putting him first. Elias was still at the kitchen table when I returned, patient and solid. "That was brave," he said simply. "That was necessary," I corrected. "So what happens now?" "Now?" He smiled, that same crooked smile that had charmed me 45 years ago. "Now we write a different ending. One where you're not anyone's afterthought or obligation. One where you're the heroine of your own story." "I'm too old to be a heroine," I protested, but I was smiling too. "Nonsense. You're just getting started." He reached across the table and took my hand. "I've waited 45 years for a second chance. Maggie Harlow. What do you say we make the most of it?" 6 months later, I stood on the deck of a sailboat in the Greek islands, the Mediterranean sun warming my face. The $3 million sat mostly untouched in a trust. I didn't need Elias's money when I had Elias himself. We weren't married, weren't even officially living together, but we were something better. Two people who'd chosen each other without obligation or expectation. My phone, buried in my beach bag, occasionally buzzed with calls from Ethan. I'd heard through the grapevine that Sophie had filed for divorce after the wedding video went viral and her family's reputation took a hit. Part of me felt sorry for him, but not enough to break the boundary I'd set. "Any regrets?" Elias asked, wrapping his arms around me from behind. I thought about the grandson I might never meet, the holidays I'd spend without my son, the empty chair at future family gatherings. Then I thought about the woman I'd been at that wedding. Small, dismissed, forgotten, and the woman I was now. "No," I said, meaning it. "No regrets at all." The boat sailed on toward the sunset, carrying us toward whatever adventures awaited. For the first time in my 68 years, I was exactly where I wanted to be, free, valued, and finally chosen first. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. Sometimes it's getting gone and getting happy. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from, so please leave a comment and let's connect. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts about Margaret's journey. What would you have done in her situation? Your insights make our community richer, and I can't wait to hear from you.